Good morning. The first item of business today is general questions, and we go to question 1 from Hugh Henry, please.
To ask the Scottish Government for what reason reported death rates at the Royal Alexandra Hospital are higher at the weekend than on weekdays.
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary Alec Neil.
Presiding Officer, I understand that this is not the case. The member is referencing raw data that was released under Freedom of Information by NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. In the release, the mortality rate was expressed as a percentage of the number of discharges. As there are fewer discharges at the weekend, the denominator is small, thus artificially inflating the proportion of deaths. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde has undertaken a more robust analysis of the data between 2002 and 2012, and as a result have been able to assure me that there is no significant difference in the mortality rates at Royal Alexandra Hospital between weekdays and weekends. And I'm sure the NHS Board would be happy to write to the member with the details of their analysis.
Hugh Henry.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that, and I do look forward to the information from the Health Board. But the fact remains that information provided by the Health Board about mortality rates at the weekend did show that they were in fact double that of during the week. Now, there can be lies, damned lies in statistics, but if that was the case, then why was the Health Board putting out information that showed that death rates at the weekend were twice that of during the week? And I think that, as well as writing to me, the Cabinet Secretary really should ask the Health Board to go back and interrogate its statistics again, and he, as the Cabinet Secretary for Health, should undertake his own investigation into those worrying and shocking statistics and give everyone an assurance that, in fact, they are not fiddling figures, and let us get the real facts.
Okay, thank you.
Presiding Officer, it's always advisable for members to leave a degree of flexibility for their supplementary, just in case the original answer doesn't fit with what they wanted to hear. So I would suggest to Mr Henry that we provide him with the accurate figures, which I will do through the Health Board, and then he will be able to see there is no fiddling and no problem of the kind that he describes.
Thank you. Question 2, Helen Eadie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its assessment is of the health risks of the radioactive material at the foreshore at Dalgety Bay, and I do register an interest, Presiding Officer.
Minister Michael Matheson.
Scottish Ministers take advice on this issue from a number of sources. The Scottish Environment Protection Agency has restricted access to certain parts of the beach and has posted advice notices to the public. In October last year, the Health Protection Agency reported that there was no public health reason for individuals to stop using the area, subject to those restrictions already in place. As Helen Eadie will be aware, we met last week and I was able to tell her that I have now received advice from the Committee on Medical Aspects of Radiation in the Environment that has concluded that increased rates of certain types of cancers which were reported in the media in November are very unlikely to be linked to radioactive contamination.
Helen Eadie.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and I thank him too for the very cordial meeting that we had last week. And I am very grateful to him for releasing to the members of our public in Dalgety Bay the Kamari report. And I think that to enhance the message to the public about the outcome of that report, will the Minister agree to come to a meeting in Dalgety Bay with members of the public to assure them of the Kamari report's findings? Thank you.
Thank you. Minister.
Presiding Officer, from the meeting last week, I gave Helen Eadie an undertaking to try and ensure there was better coordination between the various agencies who are involved in this matter to make sure that they impart information to the residents of Dalgety Bay in a more planned way. Unfortunately, not all of these agencies are within my control. For example, the MOD. And what I have given an undertaking to do is to make sure that the Kamari report is made available to the Dalgety Bay Residents Forum, which will then provide them with the assurance that the experts have considered this matter on the basis of the information provided by NHS Fife, that they do not believe there is a link between the radioactive contamination and elevated types of cancers that were identified. Following the provision of that report and the work that my officials are going to take forward, I'm more than happy to continue to have a dialogue with Helen Eadie to see what further measures can be taken to help to ensure that residents are properly informed of various matters on this issue.
Thank you. A brief supplementary. Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Of course, the health and safety of the people of Fife must always come first, and I would ask the Minister, since it is the MOD which has failed to deal with the contamination over 2 decades, including during the Tony Blair-Gordon Brown years, does the Minister agree that it is the MOD who should pay for the remediation, and that as soon as possible, as they have done in Amman Bank? Minister.
I do agree, Presiding Officer, that the safety of the people of Fife must come first, and that's why SEPA is working closely with the Ministry of Defence on the investigations into the radioactive contamination at Dalgety Bay. Should the MOD be identified by SEPA as wholly or partly responsible for the contamination, we expect the MOD to fund their portion of the remediation costs as determined by SEPA at that time.
Thank you. Question 3, Dr. Elaine Murray.
To ask the Scottish Government how policing in Dumfries and Galloway will be accountable to local people once a single police force becomes operational.
Cabinet Secretary Kenny McCaskill.
Each local authority area will have a designated local police commander who will work more closely than ever before with locally elected councillors and community planning partnerships to shape local services and prioritise local needs. This includes a statutory requirement to prepare a local police plan for each local authority area. All 32 local authorities in Scotland and 8 regional police services are currently involved in developing and trialling new local engagement and scrutiny arrangements which will be introduced on day 1 of the new service. In collaboration with COSLA and the Improvement Service, we have today published national guidance on good practice in this area.
Thank you. Dr. Murray.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his reply. We had, of course, in Dumfries and Galloway been assured that local accountability would be preserved when the single police force took over from Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary, and the recent announcement that there was to be one Deputy Chief Constable for the West of Scotland, essentially incorporating Dumfries and Galloway into Strathclyde, has caused concern in the region. I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary can advise when the detail of local structure will be released, as the local police didn't seem to know when that was actually going to happen. And can he give his assurance that in Dumfries and Galloway in particular, there will be no loss of accountability and no loss of financial accountability with regard to the role of the Council?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, these matters have been passed by Parliament in terms of the fundamental structure, in terms of how the local authority police matter interacts with the police. That's a matter in terms of the local commander. There will be an announcement shortly by the Police Service of Scotland of the local commander. That is an operational matter for the Chief Constable. That local commander will be the person who interacts with Dumfries and Galloway Council, and indeed I do recall from previous discussions with the Chief Executive of Dumfries and Galloway Council that he saw great advantages in terms of bringing together matters to ensure that the cooperation that exists at community planning partnerships continues. So these matters are being worked through. The local commander will be appointed, but it's a matter for the Chief Constable, and he or she will work closely with the local authority in whatever form that the local area wishes to take in terms of how they wish to set up their committee.
Question 4, Jackie Baillie.
What its position is on the inappropriate use of social unavailability codes by NHS boards to meet waiting times targets.
Cabinet Secretary Alec Neil.
Presiding Officer, social unavailability has been replaced by a patient-led system where the patient's explicit agreement is needed if they want their treatment to be delayed for any reason. This came into effect on the 1st of October 2012. Guidance on this new system was issued to the service in August 2012, and I expect all boards to ensure they are fully compliant. This new system of patient-advised unavailability ensures that the service is more tailored to patients' needs and gives them greater control, as well as providing more detail on the reasons for unavailability. The new arrangements also means that if an inpatient or day case patient has advised that they are going to be unavailable, for example, for holidays or work commitments, then the Health Board must send a letter to the patient confirming their request and explaining the impact on their waiting time.
Jackie Baillie.
Cabinet Secretary, this week it was NHS Grampian and the waiting time scandal. Last week it was NHS Forth Valley. In a report compiled by a former NHS manager, NHS Forth Valley was revealed as having the most extensive use of social unavailability codes across Scotland to avoid breaching the waiting time guarantee. Was the Cabinet Secretary aware of this when he stood up in this chamber and gave NHS Forth Valley a clean bill of health about waiting times? And if not, does he believe the practice in Forth Valley was acceptable?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, first of all, in relation to Grampian, there is no scandal other than in the head of Jackie Baillie. The scans referred to have a throughput annually of about 3,500 patients. Because of a breakdown in a scanner, there has been a backlog of 550. But of the 3,500 patients who get these scanners in Grampian every year, only about 100 come within the waiting time guarantee. And therefore, both the BBC and Jackie Baillie should check their facts before they make allegations about scandals that don't exist.
Point of order, Jackie Baillie.
Entirely about Forth Valley, aside from one reference at the beginning about NHS Grampian. The Cabinet Secretary did not at any point address the question about Forth Valley.
That is not a point of order, but you have made your point. A supplementary from Jim Hume, please.
Thank you. Would the Cabinet Secretary recognise that bed blocking due to a lack of beds and an increase in acute illnesses has led to pressure on NHS staff to use social unavailability as a mechanism to hide waiting list targets being missed, and that there's emerging evidence showing that lack of infrastructure has had a roll-on effect of an increasing amount of trolley waits where patients are admitted to A&E and have to wait for a bed to be free?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Presiding Officer, I think Jim Hume also needs to get up to date in terms of the rules governing social unavailability and the new rules operating from the 1st of October. Undoubtedly, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, because of norovirus and because of seasonal flu increase, of course there have been pressures throughout the National Health Service in Scotland. Those pressures come from the fact that there are many more patients. The actual number presenting at A&E across the board has only increased by about 2 or 3%, Presiding Officer, but the admission rates have risen on average by 15% over that period. Inevitably, that does create pressures on the system, but to try and say that there is some great crisis is absolutely absurd.
Thank you. Question 5, Stewart Maxwell.
To ask the Scottish Government how many people have been prosecuted in the last year for smoking in enclosed premises or permitting smoking to take place in enclosed premises.
Cabinet Secretary Kenny McCaskill.
In the year to 31st December 2012, 32 charges of smoking in non-smoking premises have been reported to the Procurator Fiscal. Of the 29 cases in which action was taken, court proceedings were raised in 6 and a further 23 were dealt with by direct measures. One case of permitting smoking to take place in non-smoking premises was reported and no action was taken in that case. These offences can also be dealt with by fixed penalties issued by the local authority enforcement officers.
Stewart Maxwell.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that since 2006, Highland Council have never issued a fine in connection with the smoking ban, but Dundee Council have issued 718 fines in the 6 years since the legislation was introduced? Can I therefore ask the Cabinet Secretary if he can explain the large variation in fines issued for breaching the ban on smoking in enclosed premises?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think we have to get matters in context that the ban on smoking in public places has been a success and the evidence indicates a high level of compliance with the legislation. Enforcement, though, is a matter for local authorities. We do expect all local authorities to ensure that people comply with the legislation and to have suitable enforcement protocols in place to ensure the effectiveness of the smoking ban is maintained. So it is fundamentally a matter for the local authority. Why there is that discrepancy, I am unable to advise, but it's a matter I am happy to discuss directly with the member, as indeed would the Lord Advocate.
Brief supplementary, Richard Simpson.
Yes, can I ask the Minister, the Cabinet Secretary, further whether he is satisfied that all premises selling tobacco are now registered and whether any prosecutions have taken place for the sale of tobacco from unregistered premises?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, that's a matter I don't have particular knowledge of, but I'm happy to engage with Dr Simpson or indeed to write out with a specific answer.
Thank you. Question 6. Jane Baxter.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent support it has given to developing walking and cycling infrastructure in mid-Scotland and Fife.
Minister Keith Brown.
Since 2011, we've invested over £4 million in mid-Scotland and Fife for cycling and walking infrastructure projects. This includes cycling, walking and safer streets grant and Sustrans capital funding. But I'm happy to write to Ms Baxter with further detail, including the investment that we've made in other measures such as those delivered by Cycling Scotland.
Jane Baxter.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and I declare an interest as a Fife councillor. The Minister might be interested to know that there is an excellent proposal in Fife to develop a pathway into Dunfermline town centre from Dulloch in eastern expansion. This will create not just a cycle route, but will also improve the surrounding green space and facilities to increase use of the area, but the funding for it is complex. Will the Minister join me in supporting the project, and will he consider ways in which funding for such active travel projects can be simplified?
Minister.
I'm happy to look into that, but we are content with the process that we currently have. Obviously, we make grants directly to Cycling Scotland. There is a process by which local authorities can bid into that. In addition to the monies I've already mentioned, we have around £759,000 this year, which local authorities are able to bid for in terms of match funding by working in partnership with Sustrans. And Sustrans themselves have a capital budget for the next 2 years in the region of £10 million. So that process is there. I'm not aware there are issues across the rest of Scotland with accessing that, but I'm happy to listen to any comments that the member has.
Thank you. Brief supplementary. Rod Campbell.
The Minister will be aware that North East Fife is a very scenic area, but it includes a large part of the Fife coastal path. However, it also includes busy commuter routes. What improvements can be made to the existing infrastructure in North East Fife to improve the uptake and safety of cycling?
Minister.
There are many movements that can be made, and many are being made already on the existing cycling infrastructure in the Kingdom of Fife. The cycle path network in Fife provides over 300 miles of signposted cycle routes and 8 different signed routes in the How of Fife and North East Fife, primarily for leisure, but these can also be used obviously for commuting. More specifically, by working in partnership with Sustrans through Scottish Government funding, Fife Council have already delivered the new community link from Tayport to Newport on the Tay Cycleway link. A further project is planned to improve the St Andrews cycle network in the town centre. I have a number of other examples, both of things which can be done and things of which have been done, and I'm happy to provide that detail to the member.
Question 7, Mike Mackenzie.
To ask the Scottish Government what progress has been made in expediting the proposed new subsea power cables to the Western Isles and Orkney.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the transmission network owner and operator Scottish Hydroelectric Transmission plc estimates a delay in the planned completion date of October 2015 for the Western Isles high voltage direct current link of at least 12 months, with a real potential it could be later, and estimates that the alternating current link to Orkney will be complete in 2018. The delays and uncertainty for developers on Orkney and the Western Isles are clearly disappointing. The Minister for Enterprise, Energy and Tourism made this point when he met with the company on Monday, and the Scottish Government will continue to work with the industry and Ofgem to seek interim solutions to connect more generation, drive forward the necessary grid connection upgrades and ensure a fair transmission charging regime.
Mike Mackenzie.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Does he consider that by delaying the provision of these cables, leading to significant cost increases and to significant delays for generation projects large and small, that Ofgem and the UK Government have acted in the best interests of consumers?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I think clearly, as I said in my original answer, that the delays in relation to the UK electricity market reform, and I think more importantly the uncertainty that's been caused by that process and the debate that surrounded it within the United Kingdom Government, is a significant factor in explaining the delays that have been experienced. What the Scottish Government has tried to do is to ensure that we positively and actively support a positive resolution of the electricity market reform process in the interests of Scotland, of consumers, of investment, and also that we work with Ofgem to ensure that any solutions that can be advanced to ensure that renewable energy potential can be realised in as timely a fashion as we possibly can do can be achieved. That will remain the approach that the Government takes in this respect.
Very briefly, Jamie McGregor.
Thank you. I see that the Western Isles may expect their link by 2015. But does the Minister agree that the suggestion that Orkney upgrade will not be ready until 2018 is, at the earliest, is really unacceptable?
Cabinet Secretary, briefly, please.
I think I made clear in my original answer to Mr Mackenzie that the Government clearly would prefer these issues to be resolved more speedily, and the decision-making processes in this respect lie with Ofgem, with the United Kingdom Government and with the industry itself. What the Government in Scotland will do is to work with all parties to try to advance that agenda. And Mr McGregor makes a very fair point about the significance of renewable energy activity within the Orkney Islands, where clear leadership has been taken in this respect, both by the local authority and by the Government, and we will use every endeavour we can to try to advance that timescale.